Mass protests erupt across China. Shanghai reopens, but maybe doesn't. And it turns out China promotes real democracy. Then more on this week's China News Headlines. China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. You should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect yourself whenever you go online. Pressure is mounting in China, caused by unending lockdowns, thanks to Chinese leader Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy. Those are some catchy slogans. But the fact that people are protesting isn't a surprise. As we learned in America, the biggest hobbies folks picked up during the COVID lockdowns were baking, crocheting, and angrily revolting. This is what happens when people are forced to cut their own hair. This protest happened at Tianjin University. Tianjin University has been under a lockdown since January. Students were not allowed to go home during the Chinese New Year. They've just been taking online classes while confined to their dorm rooms. But new, even stricter measures hit parts of Tianjin last week, which prompted these protests. I can't blame them. Imagine paying college tuition fees just to do video learning while trapped in your dorm room. That's awful. I know. Watching videos is how I learned to cut my own hair. But it's not just students in Tianjin. Over the last few weeks, students in Beijing have protested lockdowns on their own campuses too. Students at Peking University started protesting last month after the university put up fences and walls around campus. That's after students had not been allowed to leave campus for weeks. After that protest, Beijing started clamping down on students at these elite universities. Videos and discussions of the protests were censored, and Peking University started urging people to leave campus and go home. Now, in the best of times, the Chinese Communist Party does not like student protests. But I get the idea that these universities want students to leave town for more reasons than just COVID. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, which was how the Chinese military ended 2 months of student-led protests. The Communist Party does not like people protesting close to sensitive dates. And on top of that, this is a politically sensitive year. In a few months, Xi Jinping will make his move for a third term in power. And I don't think he's going to be too friendly to anyone who makes it harder for him. A sensitive day on a sensitive year for a sensitive guy. If he doesn't get a third term, at least Xi Jinping can be the leader of an emo band. But hey, at least Shanghai is opening up again. Shanghai had announced an 8-day-long COVID lockdown at the beginning of March, but like a Hanukkah miracle gone wrong, it lasted way longer than 8 days. The lockdown has lasted more than 2 months. But this week, finally some good news. Shanghai officially lifted its lockdown for most of its 25 million residents on Wednesday morning. Yay! Shanghai is back! But Shanghai's reopening remains a gradual process. Wait, what does that mean? It means that while Shanghai is officially open, parts of it can close again, just like that. A reporter for the South China Morning Post said his neighborhood was locked down again after one person tested positive and walked through the streets. That was just hours into the official reopening. Welcome to the new normal. And coming up after the break, so many sellouts to China. Welcome back. Well, this past week was a great one for people totally selling out to the Chinese Communist Party. Let's start with UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet. She concluded her trip to Xinjiang, a trip she made very clear was not an investigation. Because why would the UN Human Rights Chief investigate a place where genocide is happening? That'd be like expecting a health inspector to do something about rats in a kitchen. Don't be ridiculous, they're the ones cooking the food. But even worse, her trip ended up helping China deny its genocide against Uyghur Muslims and other repressive policies. According to the UN, Bachelet noted that everyone she met on her visit, from government officials, civil society, academics, diplomats, and others, demonstrated a sincere willingness to make progress on the promotion and protection of human rights for all. So, Chinese government officials say they're willing to make progress on human rights, and you just believe them? That's like Kevin Spacey saying he's willing to make progress on not sexually assaulting teenage boys. Bachelet also framed the genocide in Xinjiang the way the Communist Party wants, in terms of counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures. So it's clearly the Uyghurs who are the problem then. The Communist Party was just countering terrorism and got a little carried away. She also reported, without skepticism, that Chinese officials in Xinjiang claim to have closed the re-education centers where an estimated 2 million innocent people have been imprisoned. I guess she was too busy in China to notice the thousands of leaked photos of Uyghur detainees that came out last week. Or maybe she was too busy keeping up with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. Who cares about an active genocide? Hashtag justice for Johnny. All in all, the UN human rights chief did the propaganda work of the Chinese Communist Party. Really makes me wonder about her. Did you know that Michelle Bachelet used to be the president of Chile? She ran as a member of the Socialist Party. And her father worked for the disastrous socialist president Salvador Allende. After Pinochet came to power in the 1970s, Bachelet spent time in a detention center before she managed to flee to Australia. But then she moved to East Germany. That's right, East Germany. Because communism is so much more appealing than freedom. I'm less surprised about her statements on Xinjiang now. This is as shocking as learning that the Hamburglar likes burgling hamburgers. Really? Who could have guessed? But that wasn't the only big selling out to China that happened recently. The Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, ran a piece called "It's Time for Biden to Lift Trump's China Tariffs." This was by their editorial board. I bet Amazon would love to not have to deal with those tariffs anymore. The Post's editorial piece should have just been called, "Let Jeff Bezos Make Even More Money." The New York Times ran a piece that is now called "Russia or China, the U.S. has a choice to make." But it was originally called "China Doesn't Have to Be Our Next Great Enemy." No! Why would a Marxist-Leninist regime that considers itself actively at war with the United States need to be our enemy? That's like Batman saying, "Yeah, the Joker murdered Robin and crippled Batgirl, but I don't see why we can't be friends." And meanwhile, it turns out Google and YouTube have been pushing pro-Beijing propaganda to the front of searches. Which is why I always tell you guys how important it is for you to share these videos with your friends and family. Because the biggest search engines in the world are actively suppressing us in favor of China's propaganda. Maybe I need to do a little something to help the algorithm pick us up. Here's a picture of cute puppies. Oh, who could suppress something as adorable as this? So, a lot of selling out. But there is good news this week. The Chinese Communist Party's plans in the Pacific are falling apart. More after the break. Welcome back. Before we get to that good news, here's another crazy story. You know how there's a baby formula shortage? Well, a Canada-based baby formula plant, which uses Canadian cows and goats and has gotten more than 200 million Canadian dollars in taxpayer funding, ships all of its product to China. That's because Canada Royal Milk is owned by a Chinese company. I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. But don't worry, American and Canadian children who are short on baby formula can learn to live off the salty taste of our tears, bottled domestically. But some good news. China has been trying to create a regional security pact for the South Pacific, and thankfully that has failed, at least for now. Controversy surrounded the trip, which is why local reporters in these countries weren't allowed to ask China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi any questions. Always nice when your country is discussing a deal with an authoritarian regime you're not allowed to question. Lay off, guys. Don't you know how sensitive Xi Jinping is? This is especially concerning considering what China was seeking. A leaked draft of the proposed communique raised concerns with its sweeping provisions, spanning far beyond developmental assistance and economic ties into policing, cybersecurity, and ocean mapping. But while that has failed, China did still manage a bilateral security and economic agreement with Tonga. Tonga is one of the poorest nations in the Pacific, so it's been ripe for Chinese infiltration. It joined China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2021 and now owes 2/3 of its external debt, worth $195 million, to China's Export-Import Bank. Meanwhile, Chinese troops have begun training Solomon Islands police. Solomon Islands had some pretty massive protests against China's expanding influence and the corruption it's bringing. I'm sure with Chinese-trained police, those protests won't be a problem in the future. Don't worry, won't be anything too serious. I'm sure UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet will inspect and find nothing wrong. Speaking of China and the Indo-Pacific, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern met with President Biden at the White House this week to talk about forging closer security ties. That's something that would have seemed difficult even a couple of years ago, but no longer thanks to China's aggressive actions in the Pacific. And speaking of aggression, China has made its second largest breach of Taiwan's air defense zone this year, right as a U.S. delegation visits. U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth led a delegation meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. Part of what came out of the meeting is the U.S. National Guard planning to cooperate with Taiwan's military. And in the face of a Chinese invasion, more Taiwanese citizens are learning how to use guns. Freedom-loving, gun-toting Taiwanese? Oh, they're becoming Americans. I'm just kidding, Taiwan's pizza is way too weird, even for Americans. But the Chinese Communist Party isn't happy about the growing international support for Taiwan. Then again, I'd hate to see what the Chinese Communist Party is happy about. They probably have the darkest vision board ever. This interview with Taiwan's Foreign Minister Joseph Wu in the Jerusalem Post created a huge backlash from China. Over the years, Israel has accepted more and more Chinese investment. Wu warned Israel against closer ties to Beijing, warning it would give China greater ability to bully Israel, which is exactly what China has tried to do in the past. The author of that article tweeted that the Chinese embassy demanded he take it off the internet, or they will sever ties with the Jerusalem Post and downgrade relations with the State of Israel. They did not take down the story. I think Minister Wu said it best in that article. A very prominent American diplomat told me that you must be doing something right when China gets upset. So don't worry about China getting upset at you. When they get upset at you, that means you're doing something right. Which is why I am so proud that this state-run China Daily article referred to us as disgraceful anti-China garbage. You can now get that on a t-shirt. Check it out at chinauncensored.tv/merchandise. Speaking of angering China, this is George Yang, a Chinese immigrant running for California superintendent. And he wants to make sure Mao's Great Famine is part of every school's curriculum. To which I say, it's not already? I really need to launch that new history channel we've been planning. Here, let me give it a little boost from the algorithm. Remember how China tried to blame COVID on the US? Well, guess what they're saying about monkeypox? Chinese social media users are speculating the US could be the source of monkeypox infections now reported in at least a dozen countries. This is the problem with China banning so many movies and TV shows. Now they have nothing on but reruns. Bad reruns at that. According to this new report by the nonprofit Hong Kong Democracy Council, there are more than 1,000 political prisoners in Hong Kong. Before the major protests began in 2019, there were only a handful. Just goes to show what you can accomplish with just 3 years, a can-do attitude, and a total disregard for democracy and due process. Inspiring, isn't it? According to the report, Hong Kong has one of the fastest growing populations of political prisoners in the world, rivaling Belarus, Burma, and Cuba. Other societies where authoritarian governments have recently cracked down on protest movements. Most of these prisoners are young, under 30. 15% are minors. In Hong Kong, you no longer ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. You ask them what they want to be if they grow up. Keep that in mind as I tell you that China says it will work with Russia to promote real democracy. Yes, all this time we thought democracy meant a government of the people that protected freedom of speech and belief. Turns out real democracy is autocratic rulers clamping down on society. Easy mistake to make. China's foreign minister accused the West of monopolizing the definition of democracy. Oh yeah? Well, two can play at that game. You can't monopolize the definition of communism. In my dictionary, it means abject failure. Hey, did you see how the movie Morbius tanked at the box office? Yeah, it was a total communism. And this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. When you go online, everything you do is being tracked and logged by the websites you visit and your internet service provider, and in many cases, by the government. And if you're in an authoritarian country like China, and you upload a protest video or something that criticizes their policy, they can easily find out where you logged in from, and then send people to your home to arrest you. Citizens of nearly every country are being monitored constantly, and that's why no matter where you live, you should always be keeping your internet activity private, using a VPN like Surfshark. Surfshark secures your data with top-of-the-line uncrackable encryption, and on top of that, Surfshark intentionally does not keep logs of what you do. In fact, one cool thing it does is keep a server network in the British Virgin Islands, where local laws allow Surfshark to not keep user data logs. So if you haven't yet, check out Surfshark. With just one Surfshark account, you can connect as many devices as you want. So try it out now. Surfshark has a special deal that includes 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. You can protect yourself for just $2.21 a month. So go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to secure this deal. The link is in the description below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.